Okay, so we're going to start the session tonight in an easy cross-legged position, seated position on some padding. So tonight's session, we're going to be moving into the realms of the fifth limb of the 8 limbs of yoga, according to Patanjali. So we are following this wonderful book, the Yoga Sutras. It's 1,500 years old, not this book specifically, but the text is quite old. And it's a wonderful book to read in terms of the relevance to our modern day lives. So Pratyahara can be translated to sense withdrawal, essentially. And it's one of the main key elements of yoga, in my opinion. It's the bridge between the external practices, which you've got the yamas, niyamas, the asana and the pranayama. It's the bridge between those practices that we're familiar with, the aesthetic practices that we can see, and the practices that move towards meditation. So it's the internalization that takes place within yoga. So it's akin to, according to Hatha Yoga Pratyahara, which is a medieval text, it's akin to being like a tortoise. So your senses are like the limbs of a tortoise, and you're drawing those limbs inward. And obviously when we know this in ourselves, but when we are distracted, when we are focusing on sight, taste, senses, hearing, all of the sensorial stuff around us, we can become at sort of a whim of all the stuff that's being thrown at us. And that can be quite difficult to tolerate, basically. So this process of drawing the senses inward, the limbs of a tortoise drawing inwards, it gives us a space for refuge from all of the sensory stuff. And obviously we need the senses to be able to create a sense of who we are in the world. But we also need that inward interoceptive ability to perceive what is taking place as not as being other, but as being an internal process within. So that's my attempt at an introduction there. So we're coming into Sukhasana with the sitting bones, hopefully settled. So each sitting bone is grounded evenly underneath our buttocks. And the knees are dropping away from the sitting point. So the space here, so the knees aren't scrunched up. So we don't have this flexion. And that's why we use padding, to create space and an openness for the spine to sit or stand tall. So these 3 parts of the spine are said to be erect, and they are stacked upon one another. But you have this natural shape, the natural curve, with that sense of lordosis, the inward movement around the lumbar, that flexion, that kyphosis around the thoracic, but hopefully not a dowager's hump, which is more like this. So there is a natural sense of kyphosis or flexion shape here. And then you have the lordosis around the back of the neck. So with that sense of the erect spine, I want you to first draw your senses inwards into your torso and the breath. And we're practiced at this. This is something we do regularly in our yoga practice. So we acknowledge the way that the air feels on the skin, the temperature of the air on your skin, the weight of the sitting bones as they move downwards into whatever it is you're sitting on, the saliva in your mouth, or any taste, any residue, so I can taste my honey, lemon and ginger tea in my mouth. Just acknowledging that sense of taste and sense of sight. So if you briefly open the eyes, what can you see in front of you as you rest your gaze down on the floor in front of you? So I can perceive the curved edge of the mat, the edge of a book, a little bit of dust under the sofa, what can you perceive with your sight here? Maybe there are things making you distracted in what you can see. And just draw the eyes to a close, thereby removing that sense of sight. And then drawing your attention to what you can hear, what you can perceive through your hearing faculty. Maybe you can hear some creaking from some floors around you. Maybe you can hear something taking place in another room. Perhaps you can even hear things going on outside of the space that you're in. And if it's quiet where you are, perhaps the sense of hearing is drawn inwards towards a ringing within the body. And you could say that's sort of a sense of tinnitus, or maybe it's the nervous system humming around the body. What can you perceive with that hearing faculty? And you can drift the attention, or that slither of consciousness known as buddhi, allow that to move between these senses of what you can perceive through the sight, which may be this dark, black inner eyelid. Maybe you can see the light shining through the eyelid, or maybe there's a sense or residue of a sense of red. What can you perceive on the inside of the eyelid? What can you smell? What can you taste? And how does the air feel on your skin? What can you hear? And obviously acknowledging these senses as being very much a part of who we are. The interesting thing is, when you take away one of those senses, how much more heightened the experience is for all the others. So obviously we have to start with acknowledging what the senses perceive. But as we sit with this sense of what the senses perceive, we begin to maybe uncover something underneath this perception. And with this sense of withdrawing those senses into the body as though they are the limbs of a tortoise, we're tucking that awareness into the depths of the body. And one of those practices would be acknowledging the breath. This is still a sense, you would say, but it's an interoceptive sense of the breath moving in and out of the body. Noticing the texture and the temperature of the breath as you inhale through the nostrils. So we're breathing through the nostrils here if you've not already started to do so. Inhaling. And noticing the temperature of the breath as you exhale. What can you perceive there? As you inhale, maybe the air feels fairly fresh. Maybe you can smell something. Maybe it's warm. It depends on the space that you're in. And if you'd like to bring your finger to below your nostrils, you'll be able to sense into the temperature of the breath as you exhale. Maybe the air is slightly warmer as it transits through the body. Inhaling and exhaling through the nostrils. You can remove the hand back down onto the thigh. And let's draw our attention now into our alignment. So take your attention up to the crown of the head and imagine that someone is drawing or pulling a rope from the crown of the head. And as they pull that rope, your spine is being lengthened. So it's as though you're like a slinky, and there's a sense of this drawing upwards. And as you elongate the slinky, the crown is moving up towards the ceiling. Draw that attention to the back of the head now, the back of the skull, the occipital ridge, I'd like you to imagine that you're opening and expanding your awareness into the back, the skull of the head here. So the heel of the head, the occipital ridge, lengthening the back of the neck. The chin draws in slightly. How much can we ease into this region of the body? So if you experience headaches and migraines, this area is really very entwined with that tension that we all experience at times. And then draw that awareness, your buddhi, your attention, that intellect, bring it down to the shoulders, allowing for the shoulders to drop away from this rising slinky energy up through towards the crown of the head. Breathing into a lovely long region here, creating much more space than there may have been originally. And then taking that, lengthening down the back of the spine, the erectus spinae, down to the tailbone. And with your inhalation and exhalation, transit that awareness from the tailbone all the way up to the crown of the head. And from the crown of the head, exhale your attention all the way back down to the tailbone. And repeat. So inhaling all the way up from the tailbone to the crown of the head. And exhaling all the way down to the tailbone. And you're moving your attention and your awareness up and down the danda, this region of the body, the danda, as in staff. You may be familiar with that from Dandasana. Breathing up and down the spine. And I'd like you now to just drop the chin towards the chest, lengthening out that neck even more so. And in a familiar way, we're going to drop and roll the right ear to the right shoulder, rocking into that space, that neck area. How does it feel? Before rolling the chin towards the chest and over to the other side. How does that feel on this side? And as you acknowledge the region of the neck here, observe the silence within. Maybe it's a perception of something that's other than silence. Like I mentioned, it may be a hum of the nervous system that you are perceiving. You may be experiencing something a bit like tinnitus. But draw your attention onto a sense of inner awareness and of silence within. Rolling the chin forwards, bringing the hands onto the back of the head now. We're going to clasp the hands onto the back of the head and allow for the shoulders and the elbows to sink forwards. And as we roll, we're going to come all the way down into a C shape, into a flexion. Coming into a slumping forwards here. Really breathing into the back of the scapula and the rhomboids. And as we inhale, let's open up the elbows, open up the front of the body. Coming into extension, how much can you expand around the front of the rib cage, around the front of the breastbone, around the collarbone? Maybe there's even more space. And then we're going to drop the left elbow and draw up through the right elbow, coming into our extension along the lateral seam of the body. Breathing alongside the side seam. So every inhalation opens and expands in between the rib cage, enlivening the intercostal muscles. On every exhalation, there's a sense of settling. Inhale, draw yourself up through the midline, and exhale, release that elbow up towards the ceiling, dropping the right elbow down. Coming into your lateral extension on the other side. Just notice if any shaking is taking place through the effort involved here. Inhaling and exhaling. Notice how the eyes are here. Do they feel expansive, or are they in their starey, rigid grasping mode. Just notice. And come back up. And draw the arms down and through behind you. So just touch the hands down behind the buttocks if you can do so, and lift up through the spine. So you're coming into like a gentle camel. Keep the chin down, so we're lengthening the back of the neck. Lovely. And draw yourself back through neutral. We're going to spiral to come into rotation from cross-legged. Coming to the left, reaching up through the spine here. Exhaling and allowing for the gaze to simply drop and settle wherever it wants to come to. Inhaling and allowing for the belly to expand, soft belly breathing. And on your next inhalation, we're going to come through our neutral and spiral around to the other side. Inhaling and finding that space in between the vertebra and the reaching up of the crown as though someone's pulling with a rope. Exhaling and allowing for a sense of settlement. Inhaling, moving forwards. And we're going to bring the legs out now. So create some space. I'm just going to shuffle backwards. So we're going to bring both legs out in front, coming into Dandasana, rolling onto the front of the sitting bones, spiraling the toes up towards the ceiling. The spine is tall, the hands rest down by the side. So you're coming into staff pose, Dandasana, named after the danda, from the tailbone to the crown of the head. Reaching up through the spine here, coming forwards into Paschimottanasana, allowing for the spine to settle forwards. And we're moving mindfully. It's interesting because I've been teaching mindfulness with a hatha flow. Pratyahara is very much staged just beyond mindfulness. If you get stuck on the semantics of meaning and stuff, we mindfully move ourselves into this forward position. And the senses you may perceive are drawn inwards. I think it's very difficult to feel scattered and attached to specific sensorial input when you move into a forward fold. And maybe allow for yourself to settle on forward slightly more, just feeling that openness along the back of the body here. Obviously, we've done very little prep in terms of the hamstrings. So feeling into your Paschimottanasana from a very fresh perspective of having not prepped the body. Breathing here. And rolling up through the back body, coming into that flexion, drawing the spine up. We're going to come into Janusarasana, folding the left leg in towards the inner groin, allowing for the left knee to come out to the side. And you can have the foot further down away if that's preferable. Just bring that foot in, make sure the sitting bones are balanced, and we're going to fold over the lengthened leg. And if you're going to be strict and disciplined about the alignment here, you are almost swerving the breastbone over the knee, drawing it over towards the pinky toe. To acknowledge that sense of squareness in the hips here. Coming into Janusarasana, settling on forwards, drawing those sensorial limbs inwards. What do you perceive internally in your Janusarasana? How does this feel? Spiraling the toes up towards the ceiling. Neck nice and long, draping the chin over the knee, the thigh, or the shin. And drawing again upwards, allowing for that roll of the spine. Dropping the left leg in and drawing the right leg out. So you've got your external rotation here, the right hip. the foot comes into the inner groin, and we fold forwards over the knee or thereabouts, aiming for the breastbone to reach over to the pinky toe. Breathing and allowing for this settlement as we drape the body over the leg. And it may be that quite a strong sensation is coming through. But can you allow your body, your intellect, your awareness to settle inside of the body? For that sense to dissipate. To draw your awareness inwards and away from a sense of clinging and labeling, an outward looking energy. And then draping through the back of the body here, we're going to come into a Pratyahara. Bring the feet together, allowing for both knees to come out to the sides, draping again the torso over the feet. So the feet come out like a little book. Draping. Now, where is your awareness here? Is it in a limb? Is it in the Manipura area, in the Hara? Is it in the central energy within the body? Is it in the back body? Maybe it's up in the jaw. And just notice that. Maybe your awareness is circulating from point to point to point. It's perfectly natural. And then drawing the body up. We're going to come into a position of your choice to sit, to be in a seat. So you can be in your Baddha-Konasana if it's really comfortable to do so, or you can come into your Sukhasana if that's preferable. If you do come into Sukhasana, let's swap the legs over. So you're in the abnormal Sukhasana, and use that opportunity to kind of derail habitual positioning and alignment. Or you can come into kneeling. So we're going to come into Brahmari breath, humming bee breath, one of the best pranayama practices to come into this sense of the internal. And you may have practiced this with simply the thumb in the ears. And I'm going to offer you Shanmukti Mudra instead, which is the closing of the 7 gates. Now, if you experience anxiety, this may trigger some anxiety. And if that is the case, just use the easier, less complicated positioning of the hands, which will be the thumb into the ear, and the hands can just rest onto the forehead, which is still lovely. Now, Shanmukti Mudra involves the thumb and the ear, the forefinger on the forehead. The middle finger rests on the bridge of the nose, so not necessarily on the eyes. It can be on top of the eyelashes, but it's moving towards the bridge of the nose. It depends on the anatomy of your hands and your face. The ring finger comes down onto your moustache area, so just underneath the nose, so it doesn't actually block the nose. And then the little finger comes down onto the chin or thereabouts. So firstly, just feeling into this rather wonderful face mask with the fingers. It's very David Lynch, I feel. So coming into this space, and just acknowledge what it feels like to close the earlobes and notice what arises when you do this, okay? Now, how does that feel? Now, if it feels okay and you're willing to proceed, we're going to move into Brahmari breath with the Shanmukti Mudra, which is the closing of the 7 gates. If this feels too much at any point, just come into your position with the fingers on the forehead. So humming bee breath is the exhalation, the extended exhalation through the nostrils, and it's a humming sound within the skull. We're going to aim for 5 of these with your own breath, so the extension of the exhalation will vary from person to person. When you've finished, just bring the hands down, the hands open with the palms up towards the ceiling. So noticing how the breath feels within the torso, coming into your lovely Shanmukti mudra or a position of your choice, inhaling, closing the ears, you're not going to be able to hear now, inhaling, exhale with your hum. Ensure that it's very much closed over the earlobes. Inhaling through the nostrils. Closing the earlobes if you haven't already done so. All the way to the end of the exhalation. Inhale. Inhaling for your fifth. Closing the earlobes. And when you do finish, just perceive how that is, how that feels. And if you can, keep the eyes closed, thereby reducing any visual input. Hold on to that sense, if there is a sense of a heightened internal perception, otherwise known as interoception. If proprioception is the awareness of our limbs in space, interoception is the awareness of the processes, feelings, emotions, and qualia inside of the body. Lovely. So acknowledging how you feel, we're going to move ourselves now into a forward position on the hands. So swiveling yourselves into all fours, bringing the feet away. Move any props as you feel necessary. And we're going to bring ourselves into all fours. I'm just going to move my blanket. Coming into all fours, holding on to that sense that has come about from your Brahmari breath. And we're going to draw ourselves up into downward dog. But just for a moment, come down into child's pose, Balasana, with the forehead meeting down at the ground. If the forehead doesn't meet the ground, bring the ground up to meet the forehead. Feeling along that lovely long line underneath the armpits, along the serratus anterior. Lovely. And creep the hands over to the left to extend and lengthen along the lateral seam. And creep the hands over to the right to extend and lengthen over to the left. Super. Then bring the hands behind the buttocks. We're going to come into hare pose, rolling along the crown. Just be careful, Julia. So we're rolling from the forehead. And as we grasp the hands behind us, the arms come away and we roll up onto the crown of the head, taking some pressure and some weight into there, feeling along the side seam of the body, and roll as you bring the clasp over and down towards the forehead. So we'll do that 3 times, rolling onto the crown of the head, feeling the pressure as it moves down, and rolling back onto the forehead. Again, rolling onto the crown of the head, the hands move away You can bring the base of the hands together if you want a stronger sensation. And roll yourself down to the forehead. Bring the arms alongside the mat. Tuck the toes under. And with that sense of interoception, draw yourself in and up into your downward dog. So the head is hanging heavy. The top of the head, you remind yourself over and over again to relax and rest and release the neck, rocking the head from side to side, looking left, looking right. Lovely. And then drawing the toes towards the hands. We're going to creep the feet towards the hands here, dangling in Uttanasana with the hands draping. The head is released and relaxed. The knees are slightly bent. And to create extra weights as we draw ourselves upwards, remembering to loosen and relax the head, grasp hold of the elbows, bend the knees, draw yourself up through ragdoll. So each of those vertebrae can stack on top of one another, one by one, so the hip points come forwards. And the last thing, of course, with that sense of openness around the back of the head, will be the top of the head, coming into your Tadasana. And we're going to make note of how it feels to keep the eyes open. Firstly, coming into a sense of peripheral vision where the eye expands and softens along, if you imagine a landscape. So you have a sense of softening and openness, but with a hooded eyelid, much like the Buddha, that sense of hooded eyelid, a relaxed face. Notice how that is in your Tadasana. Acknowledge how the weight is moving down through the legs, sending almost little rootlets down into the ground here. Before we move into a balance, Vrksasana, taking the weight into the left leg without using the hands here. Draw your knee to the side and come into that first position, spreading through the toes. How is your breath here? With a sense of the peripheral vision, expansive vision, no strong sensations, no strong sensorial information coming in here. Now I invite you to now close your eyes. So we're taking the sight aspect away, which we really do depend on in Vrksasana. So how does it feel to close the eyes? How does that change things? And it really does change things. You may notice the imprint of whatever's around you, the light, as it is held within the mind's eye with the eyes closed. How do you feel in this position with the eyes closed? Now let's open those eyes, nice soft gaze, peripheral vision here, before drawing the leg up to another position. So it might be the shin, it might be above the knee. Be mindful not to press into the knee. Spreading here through the toes. And keeping those hip points very much stable and balanced. So you may feel absolutely happy as Larry in your Vrksasana here, or maybe you're wavering like you're in the wind. Just acknowledge that. Now, if you're moving and you're experiencing, look, I topple myself by even talking about it. If you're experiencing that shakiness, please don't close the eyes because you'll put yourself off completely. So I set a seed there. But if you are stable, what happens when you take the perception of sight away? It makes it really hard. Take that sight, take the sense away. See how much you can balance here. And obviously, if it's in your practice and you want to explore your half lotus and you know the hips are happy and the knees will not be impinged in any way, you can come into that element if that's something that is comfortable within your body and explore closing your eyes here. Now, once you have closed your eyes, it seems to trigger an instability. So can you come back to an anchoring and a rootedness on the breath, closing those eyes, really coming into your senses, your other four senses here, the sense of touch, there is that sense of proprioception with your limbs in space. And open the eyes and release the leg down. So you might feel a little bit lopsided with all of that energy coming down into one leg. So we can shake the legs out before coming to the right side. So firstly, coming into that first position, how does that feel? Really feeling down into the base of the big toe here. And you can close your eyes when you're ready. Now I might add, you can bring the hands into Anjali Mudra if you find that really useful to draw the limbs inwards. If you have closed your eyes, with that sense of relaxed facial feature, can you come into a smile? And then opening the eyes, coming into your peripheral vision, soft gaze, coming into another position with the legs slightly higher. It can be useful, I find, to really press the heel into the inner groin if you come into the higher version of Vrksasana, twinkling the toes away. Now, if you're in this space, can you close your eyes? What's happening to your breath when you close your eyes? Whoa. Do you notice the breath stopping? It's very difficult to stay relaxed when we take one of the sensorial organs away. Whoa. And then if you want to, you can come into another position. You can come into the more grounded position, noticing how that feels with the eyes closed. And opening the gaze, gazing down softly in front of you, releasing that leg away. Lovely. And we're going to bend the knees, coming up onto the toes, and come down into a tiny, tiny little ball with the hands in Anjali Mudra. You can close your eyes if you wish and explore how that feels. Focusing on the breath really anchors the attention within. And then bring the hands down. You're still up on your tippy toes. And lengthen the legs with your still on your tippy toes here. And the head reaches down to the floor. And bending the knees. Coming back down and through, pressing down through the fingers. And resting the buttocks down. So we're going to come into Gomukhasana legs here. So Gomukhasana legs are an internal rotation, stacking the knees on top of one another. If you have some padding handy here, this could be really useful to ensure that the sitting bones are equal. So popping that underneath the buttocks and then pressing through the feet. Bring the hands into the side of the feet here, lift up and adjust your sitting bones. This leg position isn't for everyone, so you can come into kneeling if it feels twingy in the knees. There's a lot going on in the hips here. So if you want to come into kneeling, that's also an option. Or bring some more height underneath the buttocks. So you can go for a second block, which I'm going to go for today actually. So, be kind. Part of Pratyahara involves practicing compassion towards oneself and others, your thoughts, speech and actions. And once you're settled in the lower half of your Gomukhasana, cow face pose, we're going to bring the arms up overhead and explore the shoulder girdle here. How do the shoulders feel to lift the arms up overhead, drawing the shoulders down rather than reaching? So you've got reaching, lifting, draw the shoulders down. And we're going to spiral the left hand behind the back. Now, I should have mentioned, if you want a strap while you do this, get hold of a strap. Or you can just grab hold of the material of your clothes behind you. We're coming into Gomukhasana, cow face pose. You may be able to bring the hands, the fingers together, or just grasp hold of your top breathing through the nostrils. You've got this wonderful figure of 8 action coming through here in the shape of your cow face pose. Breathing along that danda from the top of the head down to the tail of the pelvis, tailbone. Reaching up through the elbow and down through the opposing elbow. How does this feel as you breathe and acknowledge the areas that feel dense and the areas that feel light? And you send the exhalation into any regions of the body that require it. And on every exhalation, allowing for the bones to settle. Allowing for the chin to tuck in, draping the gaze forwards, moving into the back of the neck, to release the hands away, coming into a wide wingspan. And we can roll out of Gomukhasana legs by bringing ourselves onto the sitting bones and spiraling through to the other side. So we're coming into Gomukhasana on the opposing side or into kneeling. Now one side is going to feel different to the other. You may want more height or less height. Make sure you're comfortable here. Most importantly, make sure your knees are okay. And we're going to open up through the arms once you've found the leg position. Bring the hands up overhead. Now are you reaching, which looks like this? Can you drape the shoulders down and away from one another? And bring the right hand now, so left hand is reaching, left leg is on top. And come to the other side of your Gomukhasana cow face pose. Reaching up through the elbow. Now this side for me, it's really tricky and I can't even get hold of my fingers here. And this is going to be the case for most of us. I think it's very unlikely that we'll be equal on either side. It's very common to have a little bit of scoliosis. I've got quite a lot of scoliosis in my spine, so I really notice it in certain asana. Breathing up through the elbow, down through the opposing elbow, sitting bones balanced and stable, and allowing for this to settle with the chin tucked in, space around the back of the neck, space around the occipital ridge, all those lymph nodes, really juicy area of the spine. And as you exhale, release those arms away, coming into that wide, lovely wingspan. And bring the arms down. So you want to come into a position now for Nadi Shodhana, alternate nostril breathing. Kneeling is great. Cross-legged is great. I'm going to come into kneeling. So I'm equal on either side here. If you do come into your cross-legged position, just be mindful of the fact that you're probably coming into the position that you're very familiar with. Just see if you want to untangle a little bit of that habituated movement, come into the opposing side, or just come down and be comfortable. Another amazing pranayama practices for Pratyahara, sense withdrawal, is of course Nadi Shodhana. And I think you can feel that just through the experience of Nadi Shodhana. So we're coming into the hand position with the left hand gathered around the elbow. And we're going to be using the pressure of the thumb, which is a very gentle pressure, and the ring finger. We're in Deer Mudra, so these forefinger and the middle finger either reach up towards the third eye center or come down into the center of the hand. It depends on the anatomy of your hand, to what feels comfortable. So we're going to start by noticing whether the left nostril is clear, inhaling and exhaling. Hopefully it's clear. If it's not clear, you'll need to get hold of the tissue and give it a little sniff. We're coming to the other side with the ring finger, doing the same thing. Inhaling, exhaling. Oh, I was surprised to find there's actually mucus in mine. You don't need to know that, do you? Inhaling, exhaling. So if that's the case, you might need to get hold of the tissue. It will clear through this process anyway. So we're going to come into Nadi Shodhana, drawing the left and the right hemispheres of the brain together by utilising the nostrils. The right side's connected to the left side of the brain, left side to the right side of the brain, left nostril connected to the moon, Ha, and right Tha, Sun. So when we breathe through the left nostril, it's calming. We breathe through the right, it's energizing. So closing the right nostril here, inhaling, swapping the fingers, ring finger comes in, exhale through the right. Inhaling. Closing with the thumb, exhaling through the left. Inhaling through the left. Closing with the left. Exhaling through the right nostril. Inhaling through the right nostril. Closing with the thumb, exhale through the left. Inhale. Closing the fingers, exhale. Inhale. Swap, exhale. Inhale. Swap, exhale. Inhale. Exhale through the other side. Inhale. Close, exhale. Inhale. Thumb comes in, exhale. Inhale. Close, exhale. Inhale. Close, exhale. Inhale. Close, exhale. Inhale. Close, exhale. And I'll let you carry on with your pace of your own as it slows down. If the fingering gets lost at any point, you're closing and swapping the fingers and exhaling through the other side, inhaling through the same. If you practice with Nadi Shodhana, begin to touch into those still points. So pause the kumbhaka, whether the kumbhaka is at the top of the inhalation or at the bottom of the exhalation. Those pauses become more and more key as you move deeply into this pranayama practice. And the more you work with it, those kumbhakas extend. So you may be doing some box breathing, where the pauses are as long as the inhalation and the exhalation. So the ratio becomes equal, and you come into Sama Vritti, which is Sama, same, Vritti, box breathing. So breathing through the nostrils, swapping the fingers over. If you've come out of your Nadi Shodhana, just bring the hands to rest in front of the lap. Circling the awareness from the base of the tailbone up to the crown of the head and down the danda back to the tailbone. Just noticing how it feels, whether any changes have taken place. And perhaps that sense of interoception has become heightened through the practice. Now, with no rush at all, you can stay in an upright position or you can come down into Shavasana. We're going to be doing a body scan in Shavasana, or you can do it in kneeling. It's absolutely your choice. If you are coming down into Shavasana, ensure that you're comfortable and warm, as you'll be here just for a little while. So you may want to bring a blanket for over the body. You may want some padding, a cushion behind the head. Socks are definitely recommended as we're coming into late November. So setting yourself up to ensure that you're comfortable, but obviously if you want to stay in your seated position, that's great too. You may want to get hold of a bolster if you have one. I really appreciate that you can make this as comfortable as you like. Allowing for the limbs to splay away from one another. And as though those limbs now, which you imagined being drawn inwards, the physical limbs now are allowed to splay out to the sides. So it's not as though those sensorial limbs are reaching for anything. You still sit with that sense of the tortoise, training your limbs inwards. But the limbs are allowed to extend out and away. Maybe the palm of the hand rolls up towards the ceiling in this receptive position, or maybe the palms face down towards the mat in a more grounding fashion. So whatever works for you, just be mindful of the effects that the lengthening of the legs has on the lumbar. And if you're one of those people, come into your bent knee with your bolster behind the legs. So I'm going to come into an upright position just to talk you through. And just notice firstly the weight of the body as it rests down into the ground beneath you. The sense of the weight of the body, the whole of the body, the weight of the back of the skull, the weight of the back of the shoulder girdle, the weight of the back of the pelvis, and the weight of the back of the heels as you lie here. And then notice the weight, rather the lack of weight, around the front body here. As the front body meets the air, a sense of lightness around the front of the body. Now take your attention down to the base of the feet, the base of the feet. And we're going to be circling the awareness with a sense of childlike curiosity onto the regions of the body, imagining that your awareness is like a golden thread, and that awareness is being woven through and around these body parts. So noticing the base, the soles of both feet, that expansive region of the soles of both feet. Now take your awareness all the way around the tops of the feet here and spiral around the ankles, the space around the ankles, and up to the shin, up to the shin. Allow that golden thread to draw itself around the space around the kneecap, taking your awareness up through the quads, thighs, the thighs, up through the back of the pelvis to the front of the hip points, back of the pelvis to the front of the hip points. Circling the awareness up through and around the navel, around the waist, the navel, the waist, and up along the back of the body, the back of the spine, through the back of the shoulder blades, out through the front of the heart space, the back of the shoulder blades, through the front of the heart space. And then moving up to the throat, and take that thread, that awareness to the shoulders, both shoulders, and down to the elbows on both sides, down to the wrists, and around the palm of the hands, coming out through the back of the hands and all the way up to the armpits, along the inner seam of the arms, the armpits, back up to the throat, the shuddhi, the throat, taking that golden thread of awareness up through the neck, past the occipital ridge, the heel of the skull, and up to the crown of the head. Crown of the head. And draping that awareness down along past the eyes, closed eyes here, along the nose, past the TMJ, the jaw joint, TMJ, the jaw joint, and down to the tip of the chin, tip of the chin. And allow for that awareness to become more expansive and less thread-like, draping it all the way up to the top of the head, softening the facial features as you transit past the face. And with a sense of whole body awareness, allow for that attention to come through the whole of the body, from the crown of the head, past the shoulder girdle, past the heart space, down past the pelvis, down through the legs to the soles of the feet and beyond. And then, like a laser or a beam, allow for that awareness to draw all the way up from the base of the feet, the soles of the feet, along the long length of the legs, up through the density of the pelvis, that watery space, Svadhisthana, through the core region, the Manipura, the navel, past the heart space, acknowledging the heart space, the front and the back of the heart space, past the throat and all the way up to the top of the head. The top of the head. And you can allow for the awareness to draw up and down the whole length of the body. Or indeed, if your awareness has gone elsewhere, just allow that to take place. Allow the awareness to drift to wherever it needs to drift. And if it is the case that your awareness is almost suspended outside of your body, in the space that you're in, or beyond the space that you're in, or maybe your awareness is in your head, draw it back to your inhalation. Allow for that air to rush in through the nostrils. Bring some movement to fingers and toes. And with your attention, the faculties of hearing, notice the vibrations coming from the seeing bowl before you roll onto your right side in the fetal position. And perhaps you perceive the sound as something inner. The boundaries between inner and outer begin to evaporate as you move towards concentration, meditation, and absorption, samadhi. And I invite you in the following sound to move yourself slowly into an upright position with the eyes closed, if it feels comfortable to do so. As you bring yourselves up into an upright position, coming back to the sense of the danda, the sitting bones grounded into the ground beneath you. A sense of upright energy all the way up to the top of the crown. And bring the hands into the heart space, rubbing them together. Create some tapas, some heat. Well, tapas is also known as discipline, which is a really key aspect of Pratyahara, to discipline the mind over the senses. Bring the hands, the eye sockets, closing the faculty of sight, moving into a sense of interoception. Bringing the hands down through the midline, bowing in acknowledgement of one another in the space in between as you bring the hands into the heart space. Namaste. Such a shame that I didn't get to read all of the Upanishads to you tonight. That would have been a different session, like 20 hours worth of Katha Upanishad talking about the mind and the senses. Not much yoga would have been involved in that session. I hope you enjoyed the session tonight, and next week we'll be moving into Dharana, Dhyana and Samadhi. We've got 3 more sessions until Christmas, and it's going to be interesting because you're basically moving from sense withdrawal to concentration. So we'll be using the lingams, Tritaka, next week. So thank you, Julia, for showing me your Iron Age lingam, because that's amazing. Please bring that next week. We'll be looking for either a candle is really useful, or an object with a point at the top, or a plant if you don't have an object with a point at the top, because most of us don't actually have lingams in our homes. It's not common, unfortunately. Maybe Amanda can beat the Stone Age lingam that Jeff gave Julia to use tonight. But yeah, we'll be using lingams next week, and it was lovely to see you. So I will feel free to unmute yourselves. I'm just going to pause the recording.